Hi, welcome to Translating Interview Speak, what your interviewer really wants to know. Chapter 7 out of 13 chapters. So what we're going to talk about today is questions by different job functions. And we're going to actually cover some specific functions that you may have a job in. For example, senior leadership, operations, sales, marketing, finance, information technology, and human resources. Now, let me point out, even if you are not connected to one of these job functions, you can still learn by the examples in here. In addition, even if your job is not specifically in one of these job functions, you could be asked some questions because it's related to your job. So, for example, a senior leader might be asked some questions about human resources, or in any of these areas, you might be asked some IT questions, again, depending on your job function. So, we want to make sure that you take a look at this chapter, even if it doesn't specifically have your job function name. So, let's go ahead and get started. We're Laura Brown and Barbara Limmer, and we want to help you get the best job possible.
So the first functional area we'll be speaking about is senior leadership. And the way we're going to handle these functional areas is to first talk about what aspects of yourself do you need to make sure you're selling in the interview. And then we'll talk about questions you might be asked. So in senior leadership, you've got to make sure that you're selling how you've improved the business both tactically and strategically, as well as including metrics on increased revenue, profit, market share, or customer satisfaction. You may also, by the way, discuss decreased costs. So, questions that you could be asked if you're involved in senior leadership is: describe for me a strategy you've implemented that addressed specific market and competitive challenges. Another one is, if you were our CEO, how would you redefine our strategy to capitalize on the potential of the present market? So you'll see by looking at these sample questions, it's giving you an idea of how to prepare for your interview.
Another job function area is operations. So again, you've really got to think about, what are you trying to sell to the interviewer? What's the message you're trying to get across? And so what you want to help them to see is how you've improved things like efficiency, productivity, customer satisfaction, quality, vendor performance, or maybe on-time delivery. And for all of these, you want to make sure that you include specific metrics. So again, they can see the increases and the decreases. So here are some sample questions. Describe for me a new method or process you initiated that resulted in maximizing efficiency and productivity. What performance metrics did you measure, and what were the specific improvements? Another one could be, describe a situation that shows how you use technology to improve the client or customer experience. So again, really think. Beneath these questions, they want to know, what are you going to do for us? How are you going to help us increase or decrease something? And so for all of your examples, you want to think about, how can you really connect it to this job so that they see, okay, you could make a difference for us.
The next functional area is sales. And again, even if you're not specifically in a sales role, you might be selling ideas, if not products. So, in a sales kind of function, you want to make sure you can sell in your interview how you've excelled and achieved or exceeded your sales targets. Or for a leader, how you've led your team to successfully perform. Make sure you talk about how you've identified and built relationships with customers and collaborated with other departments internally to meet or exceed customer expectations. So, sample questions you could be asked are: describe your most complex and challenging sales success. Another one is: Give an example of something you instituted or changed that required collaborative planning with other departments and resulted in improved customer relationships. Now, I do want to mention something here. As you see some of these sample questions, you might think, well, that's a pretty complex question. Yeah, you might be asked that complex question, or you might be asked a simple version of this, but the benefit in using the more complex question to help in your preparation is that you will be ready. And part of what you're selling is the complexity of what you do. So even if you're asked a simpler version, you will have a richer, more impactful example.
Another one is marketing. Now, you want to make sure that you're selling how you've developed and implemented marketing strategies that get results. But here's something that's a little bit different. That interviewers might also be interested in getting feedback about their marketing. So part of your preparation should really be about reviewing their marketing. Consider what ideas you would have for marketing their product and connect it to what you've successfully done in similar marketing strategies in the past. Now, obviously, you want to do this in a positive way. You would never want to come up and say, well, your marketing is terrible. But instead, what you want to do is again show that you've done your homework. Because when you show you've done your homework, you show that you're interested in this position. Show you really understand what they're trying to do and point out certain things that you thought were good and certain things that, based on what you have done in the past, you might want to look at and enhance, make even better for the future. So here are some sample questions. Describe a market analysis you conducted that identified challenges and opportunities for growth, including what you did after the analysis to affect change. And again, just reinforcing the fact that it's not just about what you did, it's about the result. And again, how the result connects to this new job. Another question could be describe a time when you and your team had to respond to a negative issue or a crisis very quickly. In addition, when you think about these questions, you may get a lot of negative questions, especially if they're going through some problems, if they've had crises recently, because they want to know, are you the kind of person that's flexible and can deal with crisis? So again, pay attention to what kinds of questions are you getting asked? Are there a lot of questions about negativity or problems that could help you to think about, these are the reasons that they want to bring me in, and that can help you to determine even better answers for yourself.
The next functional area we're going to talk about is finance. And again, many different jobs out there have a finance component, especially if you're in a managerial role, you're managing budgets. So, with regard to finance, you want to make sure that you talk about how you've followed proper financial processes, rules, and regulations. You're also selling examples of how you've interacted with senior leadership, investors, vendors, customers, banks, and lenders. So, questions you might be asked include, tell me about something you instituted that improved internal finance processes. And there you want to talk about not only what you instituted, but what the overall benefit or impact was. Another question, tell me about a difficult relationship you've had with a key financial vendor, banker, or lender. What issues arose and how did you resolve them?
Another area is information technology. And this is one that gets asked a lot, even if you're not directly in information technology, if you're connected to it. So here's what you should be sure to sell: how you've used technology to solve business problems and manage projects while collaborating with those outside of IT. And you want to make sure that when you take a look at the job description, if there's any particular technology that they are asking that you use, if you have used it, this is the time that you want to mention it. Show how you've been able to communicate complex and technical information to non-technical people. Sample questions. Tell me about a time when you used technology to drive business results. And then with most technical projects, it's important to balance the need for quality, deadlines, and cost. Give me an example that demonstrates your ability to balance these needs. And again, you want to end up with, and what was the result?
The next functional area we're going to talk about is human resources. So if you're involved or interact with HR at all, you want to pay attention here. And in the interview, make sure you're selling your ability to select, hire, develop, and retain employees, as well as what you do to stay current on laws. There's a lot of employment regulations out there, and they're often state specific. So make sure you can sell that. Another area to sell is your ability to collaborate and influence people in management and other departments and to manage projects, budgets, and timelines. In fact, the previous slide about information technology asked about technical projects. Well, guess what? Any kind of project includes managing deadlines and costs and quality outcomes. So that is one of the things you want to make sure you've thought through in advance as part of your interview preparation. Sample questions you might be asked pertaining to human resources are, you've done some recruiting. If you were interviewing candidates for this position, what would you look for? By the way, I used to love asking that question when I was interviewing HR people. Another one, tell me about a situation where you felt your ability to manage confidential information was being tested. Again, a lot of different roles come in contact with confidential information. So even if you're not interviewing for an HR role, you still might be asked that sort of thing. And if you're not ready for it, it could really catch you off guard.
So that's chapter 7. What's next? We're going to start part 3. Don't make these mistakes. And in chapter 8, we're going to talk about not doing your homework, not being real, and leaving without doing certain things. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like and share this video. And don't forget, you can get a 40% discount at Manning.com with code InterviewHelp. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next video. Bye.